warm colour in this. Right, so last time, do you remember what these three, for those on the video, we've just done a recap. Do your own recap. Yeah, those were the guts. And now we're moving to the heart people. And to start with the heart people, we start with the twos, and they're the helpers. They're the big helpers in life. Funnily enough, there's some churches that are just full of twos. It's, if you go to kind of any traditional Church of England kind of church, you'll generally find a whole bunch of twos who are just being absolutely lovely to absolutely everyone. It's just very nice. They're brilliant people to be around. Twos see themselves as the St. Bernard dog who comes to the rescue. It's a good thing we've been talking about dogs. This is good. They're very emotional, warm and considerate people. They tune into what others need, even if they don't know them well. It's sometimes frustrating to be so aware of others' needs, especially their pain and unhappiness, because I can't help them as much as I would like to, thinks the two. They like to take responsibility for others and worry about what happens to them, even if their actions are most often guided by their need to be loved. They can be clingy, protective and maternal at worst. The two says, it's easy for me to give of myself. Sometimes I'd like to be able to say no, because in the end I put more energy into taking care of others than I do into taking care of myself. It hurts me when people think that I am trying to manipulate or control them, when all I'm trying to do is understand and help them. They love to help, to be of service, and they need others to need them. They sometimes feel like they're being used, even though it was they themselves who created the emotional dependence. I'll give so that you'll love me. Good relationships are essential to them. They are ready to do a lot, to go through a lot of trouble in order to have them. They like giving advice and encouragement. They like pleasing others. They like giving gifts. They like guessing what you need. They like being the centre of a group. They dislike saying no. They dislike being alone. They dislike not being needed. They dislike having to wait. And they dislike sitting alone in a corner. That's our twos. And you might think that sounds rather like a 9, and there is a kind of connection in that kind of the focus on others. The difference is the 9 isn't kind of doing it to be loved, to kind of get that. The 2 is kind of, they need that connection. And 9 can quite happily actually be separate from people, and if anything, their happiest place is being separate from people because they rediscover themselves. A 2 really struggles quite often being separate from people. They really need those relationships. But 2s are amazing because actually if you've got a few 2s around, they'll get on and do everything and help everyone and make sure everyone's super comfortable and happy. But an immature 2 does that to an extent where it can become kind of like building that dependence and that really unhealthy aspect of offering to help people when actually you're only doing it so that people go, oh, thank you. And if you don't show that gratitude, then suddenly this kind of passive aggressive side comes out because you're not giving them what they really needed. And because of that, their base sin, their kind of original sin, is pride. Because actually, although they're doing all this good stuff for others, it's so that you give them all that they need, and they can feel proud for having helped you out. So actually, and I can't remember if I did this last time, but I talked about, so that's their original sin, but their original virtue then, nothing that they need to kind of learn and work on, is humility. So actually humility is the opposite of it, and that means actually I'm just going to serve for the sake of serving, just for the other person, without having to, I'm just going to take that humble kind of chill pill a little bit. So that's our twos. And we talked last time about the guts, and we talked about how some of them, and that was all about anger. The 8s push their anger out, they externalize their anger. The 9s deny their anger. The 1s internalize their anger. Well, with the heart centers, these ones are driven by their feelings. 2s focus outwardly on the feelings of others. 3s have trouble recognizing their own or other people's feelings. And 4s concentrate their attention inwardly on their own feelings. So 2s are those outward feeling people. And they can make you feel so warm and lovely. And I said last time that the 2s, if they get mixed with a 5's very inward looking, the most inward looking of all of them, then the 2s you just keep on trying to help this person until they kind of show thanks and everything, but they're not seeing beyond the end of their nose, so it's like an endless just pouring out and never getting anything back, and that can be a hard place to be. Right. So I'm getting a little bit perfectionist here. There's still some of that in me. Slightly in the wrong place. Now then, the 3s. And the 3s are achievers. These are the ones who love to achieve. In some of these books, in Richard Rohr, he gives a country to different types. And actually, for the 3s, it's America. It's those ones who want to show that achieving and success is the most important thing. Anyone can do whatever they want in America, as long as you work hard, as long as you kind of achieve, then you'll be able to do anything you want. The American dream is the dream of a 3. 3s have a happy and confident appearance. They're energetic and effective. They seek out challenges and can end up being obsessed by performance. A 3 says, I fought to succeed by exploiting and developing 2 roles. I was both a winner and an actor, able to change roles according to the situation. They know how to change their image to fit in with other people's expectations. I can easily change clothes 3 times if I go to 3 different parties, even in one evening. They identify with what they do, because they think that everyone's value is based on their results and the prestige that follows. As achieving professional success occupies almost all of their time, they put aside any feelings or qualms in order to concentrate on the objectives that will make them successful. Because there's always something to do, 3s find it difficult to take time to sit down and relax. They like to move fast and are upset when others don't like them most of the time that they spend with them. Sometimes they want to take over a project that someone else is doing too slowly for their liking. They like achieving and succeeding. They like being effective, busy, active. They like increasing their standard of living and prestige. They like living for competition. They dislike talking about their feelings. It's a waste of time. They dislike not having anything to do. They dislike meetings that get bogged down or drag on. They dislike failing or missing a good opportunity. They dislike having to wait. So that's our threes. And threes, when they're at their worst, when they're completely in their original sin, their original sin is deceit. Because actually, they just want to put across the image of success, no matter what. They will do that I always talk about the worst of the kind of the threes, completely unredeemed one will just try and pull the wool over your eyes and try and make you think that they are exactly not what necessarily they think success is, but they will be able to sense what you think a successful person is, and they will play that role. That whole idea of being an actor is a big part of it. I think it's no coincidence that America elects actors and those who have had a big kind of role in reality TV and these kind of things, where actually people are attuned to giving off the right vibes of I am successful. So actually the flip side of that is to be authentic. Their virtue, the thing they need to work towards, is authenticity and actually just being themselves. In many respects, I think the path of growth is hardest for a 3. So to actually evolve and develop in who they are and move towards that authenticity is so hard because they're so attuned to trying to work out what you think success is. So if I'm doing this, if I'm teaching an Enneagram course, they will try and purvey that they are the most authentic person there. But in doing so, just be giving in more to that kind of that deceit. So again, great people to have working with you because they will keep themselves busy. They don't. 2 things that I've noticed about 3s, they rush everywhere. They're always on the move, always just trying to get things done, show that they're success. And this may be, I've not read this anywhere, but from my experience, 3s quite often will have children later in life or not have children at all. Because it's very hard to get ahead in your career if you're kind of popping out these kids and everything like this, or having to look after. This is for women who are, particularly who are 3s. But for men as well, it's just not a high priority. But if they did, they would be the most successful. I'm sure they'd write books about it. Yeah. And they'd have Instagram accounts about perfect parenting.
I was going to say, it's like all your Instagram successful sort of influencers and YouTubers and stuff, they're more likely to be 3s or 3 leanings.
Yeah, I think they were. Yeah, I think to say that all people on Instagram most probably would be overdoing it. But there is, I mean, you can see it when.
For the people who say, I want to be an Instagram influencer.
Yeah, I want to be I want to be an influencer. And actually, I mean, you can see it because they're so unaware. They won't ever do that introspection of actually what's wrong in my life because they're always trying to look at what's successful. You can tell I think in many respects you can tell the 3 quite easily because actually it only goes skin deep. And I've tried to do line management for 3s before, and you do your annual appraisal and you ask them, right, what hasn't gone well? They are scratching their heads. Not because they don't think they've done anything badly, but blimey, they're not going to tell you. So everything they're trying to put is that whole thing of when you're in an interview and tell me about a time where you didn't succeed. You kind of try and tell a time that you didn't succeed, but you really learned from it. That's the only way they'll be able to do it. So yeah, they're quite funny people to be around in many respects. But yeah, as I say, it's the American dream, and there's a lot of 3s around in America. Right, now we move to the French.
Right.
The fours, the romantics. And these, I won't use I'll try and stop using the countries, because actually I think the countries are, for some of them, they're just outright racist. And it's, I think one's Germans. I think that's the Germans. So if you ever identify with the German kind of, the engineers, the precision.
It's true. It's literally in your name, babe.
It's true.
It's German, very German. Who's the closest German to you that you've like? Dan's Dan's granddad.
Dan's granddad.
Yeah.
Edward.
Yeah.
I don't like him.
Was that a growl or a fart?
Wow.
Like a, oh. I start
Okay.
singing in a minute.
So it was Nine's the Netherlands?
Well, I think 9 is the one that's the most. That's the one that I really disagree with how they describe it in the book, because it's far too general. They describe 9s as any pre-industrial civilization or country. So it kind of describes tribes in Brazil, tribal kind of places in Africa, but all over the world. Because actually, they're just living in harmony. They're kind of just trying to seek kind of understanding with those around and this, that and the other. But there's something slightly kind of, something about saying that 9s are those ones who haven't quite evolved that much or anything, or reached a certain level of civilization. I think that's an unfair thing to say for those countries as much as 9s. But yeah, that's the kind of the idea behind that. Right, 4s, the romantics, who have strong, intense emotions. And remember, we're talking about feelings here. 2s externalizing, 3s not sensing. It's almost that denial kind of thing, or just not really aware of either their own or other people's feelings, but they'll know what you think success is. And 4s, and I dare say the worst example of a 3, sorry to go back to 3s, the worst example of a 3, I think Donald Trump's most probably a 3. Donald Trump is a 3 because it's got no real core to what he believes. He would just, he wouldn't even believe the votes, because surely I must succeed at absolutely everything. So if the election says I don't succeed, well, the election must be wrong, because I succeed at everything and I have to portray success. And will completely contradict himself in 3 different speeches, because they're 3 different audiences. He's just trying to tell people what they're wanting to hear. Right, anyway, 4s. 4s are great romantics who have strong, intense emotions, very focused internally. They are attracted by beauty, uniqueness, and what is different. They prefer nostalgia and melancholy to banality. They prefer nostalgia and melancholy to banality. The importance they place on emotions gives them enormous creativity. They are sensitive and have a need to express their emotions. Think Leonard Cohen. Think I don't know who most of these people are. Rimbaud.
Don't know.
No idea. Baudelaire, Leonard Cohen.
Baudelaire's a French author, isn't he?
Yeah, and Piaf.
Edith Piaf,
Piaf.
the singer.
Oh yes. Yeah,
No.
There we are. Yes, that's it. Because of the depth of their emotions, they feel different from others. They need warmth, for someone to listen to them, for someone to take the time to share their feelings and intensity of life. They are idealists looking for a meaning to existence. They are often at ease and effective in the important moments of life, both theirs and yours. They like sharing their feelings. They like using their creativity in the way that they dress, in the way that they work, in the decoration of a dish or a room. They like experiencing unique moments, intense and exceptional. They dislike banality, routine, the everyday. They dislike criticism and lack of respect. They dislike having to follow a procedure to the letter. And
It sounds quite like Albert and are they all middle children with people, but actually he's quite likes the rules, doesn't he? In some ways. Apart from that, I would have said that was just like him.
There's every 4 that I know is highly creative. They're artists, they're graphic designers. They've got that kind of streets them because the aesthetic, it pervades. They see the emotion in everything. So actually, even in a font, they'll be able to they'll be able to feel the difference, how that is going to make a difference to whatever you're going to do. Yeah. And but often and often if they're into art and drawing and stuff like that, the intensity of their art is just something else. The 2 very strong 4s that I know, they will have their art that they'll show to other people, and then they have their personal art that they dare not show to other people because they're like, this is too deep, this is too dark to share to others, because actually, and because of that, they're prone to depression, they're prone to getting caught up in their feelings, and one of the big kind of keys out of that spiral downwards, and every 4 that I've known that I've kind of spoken to has connected to the revelation of discovering that you can have feelings rather than you are your feelings. Like, because actually they feel it so deeply. That defines. So actually, if they're down, that is all encompassing. If they're up, that's all encompassing. But the idea of having a feelings and separating yourself from your feelings is like a massive revelation. In the way that most others wouldn't kind of connect. And the interesting thing is, so that what we should have here is the 5 and the 4 kind of either side of the midpoint, with the 9 being the midpoint. And the 4s are most in their feelings. The 5s are most in their thoughts. So it's like beside each other. But when you look at if you look at the little diagram on the second page, there's like a big gap between them. There's no lines that kind of link the 2 of them in any kind of way. And that kind of shows that division between them. So the 4s actually find it very difficult to think analytically about their feelings, because they're so just in their heart in that respect. Interestingly, their root sin, their kind of original sin, is envy, because actually they're looking out at everything else and they are just feeling that jealousy, that desire, that thing of actually everyone seems to have something that they don't, because they're so kind of aware of their emotional deficiencies as well. They look out and they think everyone else has got this something that I don't have, and they want that, and they can get caught up in that. And one of my best friends and one of Toby's godparents is a 4 who's a graphic designer who wears black all the time, rides a motorbike, and just and it's really funny because he's always been quite depressed, but when he's been for counselling and stuff like this and started to make a step forward, you see that he kind of goes, actually life without that intensity of emotion is a bit boring. So he'll almost prefer to be in that place of kind of, it's better to feel down than not to feel, or something like that, or to feel just average. So actually that's kind of some of where the envy plays in. I think this is the hardest one for me to understand, kind of how envy plays into it. So I'll read this bit, the wider description. When they allow themselves to be overwhelmed by envy, they lose their balance and move off centre. They see everything in the world through their emotional filter. Envy arises from their inability to be satisfied with the things as they are, because they're afraid of finding the presents too mediocre. That's kind of what I mean about actually it's better to, it's better to feel something than not. They fabricate emotional intensity in order to spice up the ordinary. They prefer situations that provoke anxiety or ecstasy to dreary everyday life. Think every goth that you've ever met, if you have. That's the fools. And here's a word that I should have looked up beforehand. Equanimity is their virtue. What does equanimity mean? Equanimity. I'm going to read this one as well. Equanimity, or evenness of temper, is about feeling in harmony with yourself, whatever the circumstances may be. Envy, on the other hand, is always focused on something outside of you. When fours find equanimity, they realise that they already have all that they need, and that they are perfectly fine the way they are. That's equanimity.
Equanimity is sort of being at peace with yourself.
Yeah.
Accepting yourself.
I suppose equal gives you an impression of a balance, isn't it? And that's what you need, is that they're not one way or the other. It's that actually it's okay
It's okay to be in the middle. It's okay to be all right.
Last week you said, I think, that if you're a number, you can have a leaning one way or another. Can fours have that leaning? Because you were saying that 5 is so different.
So the wings, it's very rare to find a 4 with a 5 wing or a 5 with a 4 wing, because
they're so different.
They're so separate.
So generally the people who are kind of like your graphic designers and stuff are more like, oh, I'm so depressed, but look how successful I am.
And that's it. Because image is a big thing for a 4, but also for a 3. Now, if a 4 with a 3 wing will be less likely to kind of change for the sake of others, but they will still. And so this graphic designer that I know, who will never watch this video, he runs a business, his own business, and he runs it well, and he will be able to kind of change his look for going to kind of do a pitch and this, that, and the other. His business partner, who does not run the business, is a complete 4, and will turn up looking like he's a full-on goth. Will not dress up, will not change his clothes for it or anything. He definitely doesn't lean into that kind of 3 side of things. He's just completely in that 4. Yeah, I've not met a 5 or a 4 that leans into either of those directions. You kind of think actually if they did, they would be quite a well-rounded person. That's a good balance. Yeah, and I dare say, and interestingly, the lines don't go in that direction. Because 4, and it's interesting, the 4, their line of growth is towards the 1, where the 1's very good at kind of analysing and looking at things and going, actually, how does this all balance out? And that's their line of growth. They're able to look a little bit more objectively at things, rather than be caught up in themselves. So it's not completely towards the 5, because actually the 5, it wouldn't be a line of growth, because the 4's very inward looking, and the 5 is even more inward looking. So actually it's not really a line of growth in that respect. They might be balanced in how they think and feel, but not in their approach to the wider world. So yes, that's our our heart centers. I won't go massively into the lines of growth yet. We'll whiz round at the end. So once we've done the 9 characters, we'll then do a session on the lines of growth and the wings, and then we'll kind of talk about some of the spiritual implications of this. I thought that would be a good way to go, and some of the habits that can help us to grow. Which for everyone, just to give you a sneak peek, for everyone is silence and solitude. So this is very much from a kind of an angle, unsurprisingly, because it started with the Desert Fathers, who kind of went and isolated themselves. The answer to a lot of this stuff and how you grow is actually to face yourself and stop kind of running away from yourself and actually spend that time just intentionally looking at yourself. But how each one does that is different, and how you approach that. I'm going to stop the video and you can ask questions and everything. Whoop! Fall over as my lip did.